What's up? We're going to talk about this Jonsered 70E today. So I'm just going to do like a narration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot some footage, and then I'm going to do like a narration over the video. So you can get like a little bit like closer idea, and I can kind of like sit and talk about the machine a little bit better than like me just trying to do it off the top of my head. So this is a 70E, manufactured like sometime in the 80s. It's got a lot of similarities between all the saws of that time, all the Jonsered saws at that time, which we're going to get into. I ended up buying this. I think I bought it off of Facebook Marketplace. The guy shipped it to me. Just needed some fuel system repair stuff. And I got it running, and I just set it up on the shelf there for like the last year. And I ended up taking it home with me and just cutting a little bit of stuff with it, just to see how it runs. It's a cool old saw. I like all these old Jonsereds. I feel like they were kind of ahead of their time in the designs, and they're just pretty sweet overall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the camera angle, and then we're gonna do the overview of the physical characteristics of the saw, and then I got some footage I shot the other day that was just like me cutting a couple little pieces of wood or whatever with it. It's nothing crazy, but I had a couple pieces of cherry that I noodled up with it, so cut across the grain so you could see it working the full length of the bar. I just had to deal with what I had in the wood pile there, and then that's probably going to be it. But that's it. I'm going to move the camera angle, and then we're going to check this thing out. Also, wanted to talk to you today about our own saw brand that we just developed. It is called Squeal. This is the Squeal 069, and this here is the Squeal MS420 Magnum. Okay, here we go. Time to sit down with Dummy and look at a chainsaw. Here's Jonsered 70E, 69 cc's. Uses a special Dalmar, or not a Dalmar, but a Jonsered mount, bar, and chain. Here she is, 70E. And we're going to take the clutch cover off. Now, this clutch cover here is pretty much common on all the Jonsereds of the time frame. So I think like the 70s, the 80s, the 52s, the 49s. I think it's all pretty much the same throughout all of them. Take the bar nuts off here. We're going to take the cover off. There's the noodles from the weekend there. You'll see in a video at the end there when I'm cutting with it. One of the things that's interesting about the Jonsereds of the time is that they all pretty much came with a 3/8 8-pin sprocket. Changes the gearing a little bit, gets you a little bit more chain speed, sacrifices some torque, I think. Nice heavy-duty chain tensioner on there, 3/8 pitch chain. Front mount tensioner, by the way, on that. Yeah, we'll get that off of there. It's got the inboard clutch on it. Difference between the inboard clutch and the outboard clutch is the way the drum sits on there and then where the clutch is in orientation to the rest of the saw. So the clutch sits inboard of the sprocket itself instead of outboard of the sprocket. Easier design when it comes to putting the chain on, and pretty much standard now. Yeah, then we're going to show that little brake off. The brake actually is that black mechanism up the top. So it doesn't have a band. It's got like a brake shoe material. Pretty neat. And there's muffler, pretty similar style to all the ones of the time frame on that. And that's the oil pump. It goes in through the front, and there's a cam, and it's driven by an eccentric on the crankshaft. So it's always oiling. There's your AV system. Again, similar to everything from the time frame. And then the handle is isolated. All it does is perform, the handle and the trigger parts. It doesn't act as the tank. The crankcase is a tank, and the oil case, or in the oil tank and everything. The handle is just a handle, and it's isolated all by itself. So the way that they did it was they isolated the two handles, and they didn't integrate the tank, the gas tank, or the oil tank as part of the handle system like most saws are nowadays. That oiling system's pretty interesting too. It doesn't have a worm gear like was typical of most stuff at the time. Take one apart one time and look at it. Pretty interesting. There you go. Regular old air filter there.
And look at this. You get to watch me take screws apart. Should have grabbed my impact gun. But that top cover is all made out of magnesium. And so is the air filter cover. It's a heavy-duty cast magnesium. And then we're going to get into, I'm going to show you about the spark plug, which is a little bit interesting. You take the cap off the spark plug. I don't know why all the Jonsereds were like that. I never looked into it, but all the Jonsereds were the same way at that time period. You actually took the little cap off the spark plug, and it's like threaded there, and then the mechanism to hold it on was, suited for that instead of everybody else, what you're used to as a standard. So here, I get you a better look at it there. Yep. And then this thing had a capacitor discharge ignition coil on it. So what they did at the time was it used to be points, and then from points it went to capacitor discharge, and now it's like a fully electronic. The capacitor discharge unit, it was usually two separate units, pickup coil and a capacitor discharge unit. The capacitor discharge unit performed the same function at the time as the points. And this one has some little ignition chip on it or something. Oh yeah. Tillotson HS carburetor on there, fuel line, fuel filter, and all these Jonsereds of the time pretty much had the Tillotson HSs. Is pretty low, so I like them. I'm pretty enthusiastic about them. We'll take a starter off here, get a better look at the ignition coil. Like I said, this one has a chip on it. I don't know if somebody. I don't know. These things had two different ignitions on them over the years, and I'm not that well versed in them. And I know the one ignition system, because the coil actually bolts to the cylinder, and you got to have the right cylinder. And I think this one's been converted because there's a whole shitload of holes drilled in the top cover and in the starter. And I think the old one, the coil would be inside this. Inside the starter cover. So I don't know. I'm not that well versed on it. I just know that there's two different ignition systems for these, and the one is to get something to work. You got to really screw around. And there you go. Pretty typical starter of all the Jonsereds of the time. Very similar to everything else. Nice sturdy design. You hardly ever see one of these beat up or blown up. Yep. And that's it. That's the saw. Oh, let's watch it cut. That was fucked up. Okay, let's try it again.